Thank you for joining me this afternoon. We've got quite a lot to cover. I'm talking this afternoon about how to bring focus and precision to a brand and what that means and what the opportunity cost is of not doing that. So without any further ado, I've got a few parish notices to get started with. I'm just going to do a little bit of window arranging here, and then we'll get right into it. There we go. That looks absolutely how I want it. Good. Okay. So where I'm coming from with this is I've been doing marketing stuff for 25 years or more. We've done more than 130 branding projects, from very large, complicated product-focused branding like HPE SimpliVity, Microsoft Project, and other things for big multinationals, through to a complete website, verbal, visual branding and copywriting for some smaller clients than those multinationals. And so I've been doing this a long time. I have opinions about this. I'd like to also give a big shout out to my colleague Sean, who put the slides together for me and helped me sort of shape today's presentation. So if anything in today's talk is interesting to you, strikes a nerve, you'll want to explore it some more, and you would like me to take a personal look at your branding, your website, your positioning, I'd be delighted to do that. You can email me, matthew@articulatemarketing.com, or you can book a meeting straight into my calendar at articulatemarketing.com/meet. Would love to hear from you. Before we go any further, also this week I welcome our new Chief Feline Officer, Loki, who is the most gorgeous and frantic Maine Coon kitten who arrived at Chaos Cottage on Saturday. There's lots of webinars on the website, pre-recorded. I think this is webinar 97 or 98 that I've done over the last few years, and there are more coming up weekly over the next few months. Go to articulatemarketing.com/webinars, and now we're going to talk about branding. So we're going to look at what a brand really is and what the benefits are of focus and clarity and consistency, and how to avoid a cloudy brand. Okay. Big challenge with branding in many cases is people automatically go, it's about your logo or your color palette or the visual identity. And that is often part of branding, although quite a lot of our brand projects don't go anywhere near logos. It's more than that, okay? It's about the story, almost the emotional story that your brand conveys to potential ideal clients across all the touch points. But it's not that tactical execution. In military history or military thinking, there's strategy, operations, and tactics. Branding is operating at the strategic level, but it affects and ripples down into everything that you do. And it certainly touches website design, messaging, tone of voice, sales collateral, yes, visual identity, but also verbal identity, your values, your promise. In EOS, which is the management system we use, there's a concept of, the three uniques and your guarantee. And that's sort of interesting. That's a way of expressing promise and differentiation. It's about how you want to make customers feel, how you actually make them feel. So it's across all of these pieces. Customer journey. On a fundamental level, it answers the questions: who you are, what you do, and why it matters. Okay. Sometimes reminded of Kipling's poem, and I'm not sure if I can remember it verbatim, but I think it goes something like, I kept 6 men, serving men, they served me well and true. Their names were what and when and why and how and something who. Anyway, answering questions is sort of important. If you have a brand that is not cohesive, not consistent, not differentiated, and is not aligned and sort of grounded in the reality of what you do, the risk is you become forgettable, or I think in a very competitive world, worse, you become commoditized. And when you become commoditized and interchangeable, that puts huge amounts of pressure on price. It makes it harder to sell. It has all kinds of commercial implications. And I think that's the biggest cost of an unclear or an undifferentiated or a disorganized brand. If you've got it right, it helps you stand out. It helps you build trust. It improves your marketing performance, not just because your marketing is more consistent and aligned and grounded in your promises, but also you're focusing your time and attention on things that matter for the people you want to sell to. And you're avoiding sort of random acts of marketing and charging in 10 different directions or reacting to the latest whim, opinion, fashion, fad request from the boss. And it will help you shorten sales cycles and defend margins because you create that emotional connection, those sort of heuristic rationales, reasons to choose you that may not be always at the conscious level. And equally, if you get it wrong, you give people kind of reasons to be questioning you, not quite confident, not quite certain that's going to be, maybe these other guys are more, more likely to be good. It's when you like looking at a second-hand car, you want the one that hasn't got any rust spots and leaks on it, right? So that. Okay. So let's explore some of the problems that lead to cloudy, undifferentiated, out of focus brands. First biggest problem is trying to appeal to everybody, right? If everyone's your prospective client, unless you're Coca-Cola or some other global brand, probably you are overreaching and stretching. I had a very wise editor when I was a freelance writer who said, if you try and write about everything for everyone, you'll fail as a writer. Better to be known as the best person to go to for writing about. In my case, I used to do aeroplane reviews for various magazines and other things aviation related because I'm an aviation geek and I used to be a pilot. So to get to the right people, you need to be really clear about what your ideal client profile is, i.e. the companies, businesses you want to sell. I'm assuming B2B sales here because that's what we do. And you need to be clear about who the buying decision makers are in those companies, so personas and ICPs. You need to think about also who you don't want. So we have a client, for example, Clover DX, that sells data integration software. And on some superficial level, what they do sounds like Zapier. And you can get Zapier for $20 a month, and Clover costs very considerably more than that because it's used by companies like Visa. And, it's got to be reliable and all kinds of other things that Zapier, though good, can't do. So they have quite a lot of thinking and a communication messaging on their website to like subtly say, we're for these people, but not those people. We do this, not that. Interestingly, that exercise of who you don't want as customers and how you sort of filter them out, that also has an efficiency gain because you can focus, again, your marketing on the right people and the right messages and sort of stop burdening your marketing and sales process with leads and contacts and marketing activity that don't help. Okay. Next pitfall is inconsistency. And imagine you go to a website of a company having maybe met somebody at an event, and there's a discontinuity between what you heard at the event, what you maybe saw on the stand, what the website says because the website's out of date, and then you have a sales conversation with somebody else and you get some sales collateral and that has a different visual identity, and somewhere in all of this the language changes. It's that rusty leaking car versus a continuous experience that cumulatively reinforces your trust in the brand. So things like making sure that the brand is rippled into all of these different touch points, making sure that people in the business understand what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it. That's kind of important. Yeah. So let's come on to, I've got so much to get through and I've got lots of notes that I jotted down. I don't want to sort of get drawn into some of these things. Okay, internal misalignment is also a real challenge. And it's not just the messages you communicate with other people, but if somebody is engaging with a salesperson, gets one story, and then they talk to another one, they get a different story, or they get one story during the sales process and another story actually from the customer experience after they've signed, your churn goes up. Everybody should be able to understand, communicate, express the core brand proposition, the 30-second elevator pitch at least. And to do that, you kind of need to consistently be repeating it and including it in. If you're the CEO of a company, when you are thoroughly sick and tired of giving the stump speech about what the brand is, it's probably just getting into people's heads what you're trying to say to them. People need to hear things 5 or 6 times in multiple formats before they internalize it. And I have a really good example of this. There's a reasonably well-known company that sells visitor identification information based on website visits. I'm not going to say who they are, but they're out there, and they have a very, very effective sales process. They have very compelling sales messages, very, very good follow-up. So you get this very strong message about, we do this and we can help you and it's going to be brilliant, and then when you sign, doesn't work quite as advertised. The customer support is almost non-existent. You try and raise an issue and they go, oh no, well, that feature isn't implemented yet. And you go, well, this is no use to me. I mean, I'm telling my story. This happened to me. And then you meet the lawyers who say, well, you signed the contract. You can't get out of this for a year. So very, very discontinuous experiences. And think about the brand experience of that company. If you meet me individually and buy me a beer, I'll tell you who it is. I run a marketing agency. I talk to hundreds of potential customers for this business every year. And anytime it comes up, I tell people, don't buy it. Their lawyers and their salespeople are much better than their software engineers. Anyway, so inconsistency. Another problem, I think, a pitfall, is you have a shiny new brand, you have tone of voice documents, you have messaging houses, you have visual identity, logo, Bibles, blah, 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 all that stuff. Great. And you polish up your website. Fantastic. And then everybody goes, right, that's it. We've done that for a bit. Don't worry about it. And I always say this about websites. Websites are a journey, not a destination. You should design and plan your website for continuous optimization, improvement, and kind of work. It's not something that you do and then don't touch for 4 years until you hate it and you have to replace it. It's an ongoing project. Brand is a little bit the same, except part of the job of being a brand guardian is not to keep evolving it. It's actually to keep true to what is the core of the brand, even though the circumstances, product, services, delivery media are changing over time. So there needs to be a little bit of a process and rigor about that. Somebody needs to be responsible for it. And certainly in the world of technology where we work, companies will often have things like ISO 27001 quality assurance processes, or they'll have 27001 is security. They'll have 9001 process quality control, and they'll manage this and they'll be very rigorous about it and control it. But nobody is doing that work for the brand, and it seems very peculiar that they would invest a lot of money in getting the brand right and then sort of let it lie fallow. Okay, the last problem that we see very often is the smooth pebble problem. And what that means is when people are thinking about a brand and maybe evolving, updating, renewing, changing their brand, a kind of a natural reaction is to avoid kind of putting your head above the parapet. You maybe let the brand, without even consciously knowing it, be driven by what your competitors are doing. So, in health tech, for example, we see an awful lot of, blue and green colorways. We see a lot of people in lab coats and things like that on websites, for example. And lots of caduceuses. I don't know if that's the right plural of caduceus. Anyway, lots of those sort of medical symbols and things like that. Because they see that in their everyday environment, they go, well, that's what we need to do. It's very hard to get out of that comfort zone, that familiarity. It's very hard to turn your attention to what customers think, what might appeal imaginatively to customers, and away from yourself and your peers and your competitors. So this sort of man in the mirror problem becomes an issue. Also, real challenge around, in some areas of technology, vendors influencing brand very heavily. So in the world of marketing, HubSpot's very influential, and a lot of the things that they do on their website and talk about in their positioning, messaging, and visual identity, sort of gets rippled through the partner community. And back when I was doing a lot of work with Microsoft, it was astonishing how many Microsoft partners, resellers, managed service providers were basically doing 50% of their brand and their marketing activity was to support the mothership Microsoft. Nobody was sort of positioning themselves sort of in a way that looked different. They all wanted to look like mini Microsofts. It's very strange. Okay, so this rounded pebble issue is a real challenge, and you have to therefore work ideally with external people. Very hard to mark your own exam papers when you're ideating a new brand. Obviously I'm saying somebody like Articulate, but it's just really helpful to have somebody else kind of holding the ring a little bit. Also, because it avoids the tendency for the highest paid person's opinion or the founder manager, owner manager's opinion being sort of predominant. Or getting kind of consensus groupthink in a committee situation where what you get is the sum of everyone's anxieties and objections rather than something positive and progressive. So we have this idea, MAYA, M-A-Y-A. We didn't invent that. It was a famous designer whose name escapes me now. It stands for most advanced yet acceptable. So our job often is to kind of push people to the boundaries of where they are to get some differentiation, some distance, some positioning, some perspective. And we can do that better when we've got good data and good insight. And we'll come on to that. Okay, so what are the costs of not having a clear brand? What are the kind of implications of it? And it's not just, they like or don't like your logo, right? It's not, and it's interesting also just on that point. Whenever a major company changes their logo, I remember when Slack changed their logo, for example, everyone's sort of up in arms. Oh, it's really horrible. I don't like the new logo. And within days, you've forgotten what the old one looks like. Sometimes it's just helpful just to let go of it's. People might not hate it. People might react to it. Might perceive a change as, oh, that's different, but that's not the same thing as the brand being bad. It's just change. Okay, so let's talk about the opportunity costs. So the opportunity costs are those costs that you don't know you're incurring because you haven't gone down the other road. So you are incurring opportunity costs with an unclear brand, and you don't know what those costs are because you don't know what value or benefit a clearer brand would bring you. It's just a hypothetical exercise. So let's sort of try and give a little bit of an example of what are the costs of a murky brand. For example, on a website, if the messaging, positioning, language, visual identity, verbal identity is unclear, generic, inconsistent, you're going to see things like higher bounce rates, lower conversion rates, shorter amounts of time on the site. The impact, the credibility, the communication that you have with people is going to be poorer, and you're going to get that sort of erosion of trust, the rusty car problem. Over time, misalignment can impact SEO and the cost of advertising online, because what you say on the site doesn't align with what you're advertising or what you're trying, the audiences you're trying to reach and their search intent. There's also this danger, and this is another related opportunity cost, that you end up spending an awful lot of time doing the wrong kind of marketing, right? Marketing to the wrong people, or marketing the wrong messages, or bouncing about like a child running over hot sand, sort of trying to follow this trend or that trend and do what we call random acts of marketing. And that has a really high cost. And we see so many marketing teams who are kind of furiously working hard, overworked, under-resourced, under-budgeted, pulled in 10 different directions because they haven't got this guiding principle of, we do this is important, these are the messages we want to communicate. And it sort of lacks that core vision. I've talked quite a lot about this, but this sense that if you aren't aligned, if you confuse people, if you aren't clear, sales become a lot harder. And it's not only a case of marketing failing to get prospects into the funnel, and frankly, all websites now need to be working much harder in the mid funnel because people are coming straight from AI who are looking to self-serve and make buying decisions and inform themselves before they ever put their hand up for a sales conversation. So your sales, your website, your marketing collateral, your online presence, your social media, everything has to work much harder than it used to, because the job is actually to get people further down the buying journey before they talk to a salesperson, whereas previously your main job was get them to talk to a salesperson so the salesperson could do all that work. And when you do get those sales conversations, if there's inconsistencies and lack of clarity, they're going to be having a harder job to close deals and win RFPs and competition. So the whole thing just becomes slower and more complex and harder work. And those problems ripple through other areas of the business as well. So the last thing that happens, I think, is you don't get the results you wanted. You've done an expensive rebrand, maybe your website, but it hasn't gone to the level of depth that it needed. It hasn't had the rigor. You haven't looked at positioning and messaging and tone of voice and other aspects of a complete brand. So 2, 3, 4 years later, people go, oh, we've got to do another rebrand. So it becomes more expensive because you've got to fix that broken, rusty, leaking car. Whereas actually you could have picked a better one. You could have done the right thing and saved that effort. And what seems to happen, I think, is companies that have very well architected brands and maintain them well tend to go longer between website refreshes and between rebranding exercises. So you amortize that cost over 4 years, it's going to cost this much per year. If you amortize it over 6 years, because you can put off the evil hour and buy another couple of years, it costs less. Okay, so there's that. So what do you do to avoid a cloudy brand? So in the last 5 or 6 minutes, I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we find help. Okay, so the first thing is fundamentally start with your customers, right? What are the problems they've got? What are their jobs to be done? Jobs to be done theory is really interesting. Clayton Christensen, really well worth going and exploring. Really grapple with that. Stop trying to appeal to everybody. Really laser focus on the ideal client profile, ideal persona, and zoom in on that. And you may, by focusing on I'm going to use a golfing metaphor, even though I'm not a golfer. By focusing on getting the ball in the hole, you have a higher chance of landing on the green and avoiding the bunkers, the sand traps. But interestingly, when you focus on that, when you focus on the ideal customers, you don't alienate the other people who might buy from you or have historically bought from you. They'll still see that focus. They'll still see that strong brand, and you might be targeting, I don't know, central government, and you'll still get emergency services and local government and adjacent organizations talking to you because they see this focus and they want that. This fear of I don't want to alienate anybody, so I'm going to try and talk to everybody. I'm going to try and have every persona and we had a client turn up to us. They had 97 personas. I tried to say, if you market to 97 personas, what are we going to do? 97 blog posts a month? It's just too hard. Anyway, to start with your customers and their validated, well understood needs. Secondly, do the work of doing a proper brand. So research, competitive benchmarking, creative exploration, which, by the way, takes longer than you think and needs a certain creative mindset. You can't just outsource it to ChatGPT. You do actually have to do, this is still somewhere where heart and head matter a lot, not just words written by a stochastic parrot. Quite a lot of work with stakeholder wrangling, and the better your research is and the better your analysis is, the more convincing it is for people who otherwise will say, everyone can have an opinion, but if you want one, it's going to be mine. You can control that. You can put the boss sort of back in their box and get their assent to a sort of more controlled, more ambitious brand. So stakeholder wrangling is often something we find ourselves doing quite a lot, and having to take people on a journey and explore options and things like that. and really also challenge yourself to push the boundaries, most advanced yet acceptable. And here's the thing, I would say you would have a better brand. Just put aside the visual logo thing just for a second, but if you have all these sort of elements documented, better brand on 5 pages of A4 where you've done the work, done the research, really hammered it out, really thought about it, explored all the options, than any 80-page brand bible. It's that has a much higher leverage and a much bigger impact on the success of going through things than the documentation that comes out at the end of it. Also, that's an argument for simplicity, and it means that a strong brand isn't out of reach of any business. You don't need Wolf Olins, you don't need to spend £150,000 to come up with a logo. You can do it well. You can do it yourself, although I think you need outside help in most cases, as long as you are broadening your focus on the process and narrowing your focus on the eventual outcome. Okay, once you've done that, of course, the more you can align all of your touch points around that brand, the better. And lastly, when you have gone through that process and you've deployed the brand and you heave a huge sigh of relief, the new website's up, okay, the new logo, okay, we've done all the printing, I can get back to my day job now. You've got to invest in and think about brand governance. And a little bit of this now, I believe, is embedding brand guidelines into AI tools correctly, so that people who use ChatGPT or whatever for content creation or for proofreading or drafting sales emails or whatever, and HubSpot has a lot of brand tools that rely on very careful programming. You have to put in your products and services and ICPs and things like that. If you get all that right and you build all that into the AI, then the AI is also more likely to produce content that's brand aligned. And I think this is a new thing in the last year of thinking about AI and branding. Lastly, then, I just want to mention our difference engine. There's a book we've written. You can get that on our website that talks about marketing holistically. We have a series of frameworks and processes and reference architectures inside the difference engine for thinking through things like tone of voice and messaging, and indeed visual identity, logos and colors, and analyzing competitors and all these things. So we can deploy all of this to build your difference engine. We'd love to do that if that's of interest. I have my no BS marketing review, brand review would be the first step. It's free, half an hour of my time plus a little bit of prep from me, and let's see how this journey works out. And yes, for the second time today, I am finished to the minute, and I'm now going to indulge myself in a little anecdote. There was a famous historian called A.J.P. Taylor who used to do lectures on television. He used to do them in the days of black and white TV, when most TV went out live, and he would do these half-hour programs. You can still see them, I think, on YouTube, where he would talk about the leaders of the various countries in World War II, for example. So he would be on television for 28 minutes, and he would finish the last word at the exact moment, and he would do that live without hesitation, repetition, or deviation, as they say. So this has always been my gold standard. I mostly fail, but today I succeeded. So red letter day for me. Thank you very much indeed for joining. That's it for this session. I do hope you'll get in touch, and have a wonderful afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.